On the next part of our trip, we get a taste of Shandong's abundant natural produce, go straight to the greenhouse for dinner, and check out seasonal ingredients that are taller than an average human being. And finally, we'll go out to sea to take a dip in the morning sun to reap the harvest of a year's hard work. Shandong's fertile farmlands have made it one of the most populous areas in China throughout the country's history. In Chinese culture, salt is one of the 7 essentials of daily life, and Shandong is the largest salt producer in China. During the spring and autumn period around 2,500 years ago, the state of Qi made the most of its location next to the sea. It collected salt tax while selling salt to the inland regions. This made it the richest state among the 7 principalities. In modern times, salt is still one of the basic raw materials used in the chemical industry, and demand continues to rise. Fortunately, it doesn't look like supply will run out anytime soon. Flying inland towards the city of Shandong, the view is dominated by 2 types of houses. Those with red roofs are for people, and those with transparent roofs are for vegetables. People in Shandong have farmed this way for over 30 years. The plastic film lets the sunlight through and retains heat inside the greenhouse. This means that even during the coldest time of the year, people can still get fresh vegetables. Today, the fresh vegetables grown in Shandong are sold to over 200 cities across the country. These green onions aren't being sold at the market. They're all candidates for the King Green Onion competition. At this annual grand event in Zhangqiu, prizes are given to the tallest and sturdiest green onion. The candidates stand at an average height of above 2 meters. It looks like number 10 is the one to beat. As these green onions don't have fully developed root systems, it takes little effort to pull one out, giving rise to the idiom, like pulling a green onion off dry land. People in Zhangqiu have been growing green onions for over 500 years, but it's only in modern times that they began to get this tall. And thanks to this competition, the green onions of Zhangqiu have become an online sensation. In October, in the mountains of Yimeng, apples start to ripen. Sunlight is reflected off the silver mulch onto the bottom of the apples. This makes them even sweeter and redder. From above, they're a picture of blazing red. In June, this part of Shandong is covered in a golden sea of wheat. Here in the wheat fields of Tancheng County, combine harvesters handle the tricky business of wheat harvesting. The harvesters collect the grain. They throw the straw back into the fields. The straw is then lined up in orderly lines by the hay rakes. After this, bundling machines press and band the straw. Finally, straw loaders with flexible tongs collect the bundles. After collection, the straw can be used as fuel, fodder and raw materials for paper making, or as compost for mushrooms. The transformation from waste to treasure is complete. In Shandong, farming also takes place out at sea. Daqing Island is the province's farthest town from land. Harvest season has arrived. At 4 in the morning, villagers sail out to sea. Over 1,300 hectares of kelp is grown here, covering a space even larger than the island itself. 1.5 million boys hold up 30,000 ropes, each holding 90 strains of kelp. Seven months earlier, seedlings were transplanted one by one onto the ropes by hand. Today, they're being collected, again by hand. After stacking up as much kelp as possible, the villagers sail back. The freshly harvested kelp can now be left to dry during the hottest part of the day. These shoals are an ideal place for the job. The kelp is spread out, and every 2 hours it is moved and turned. Shandong's mountains, seas and Great Plains have made it a leader in agriculture for the past 20 years. The central part of Shandong is its highest. We head up to the summit to get a view of the world below, and then we pay a visit to an ancient sage in the city of Chufu. Mount Tai is considered the most majestic of China's 5 sacred mountains. In ancient times, people believed that this was the closest place on earth to heaven. Confucius once said that he who climbs Mount Tai will realize how small the world is. Since the time of Qin Shi Huang, China's first emperor, 12 emperors have held sacrificial ceremonies here. These rituals seem to have made Mount Tai even more majestic, turning it into a cultural symbol that transcends its geographical significance. In 1936, an alpine meteorological station was built at the summit of Mount Tai. It was named after the mountain itself. At the time, it was the highest and most well-equipped station of its kind in Asia. The station stands on terrain so steep that it is inaccessible to vehicles. All construction materials, tools, equipment and supplies had to be carried up manually. Explorers, emperors, intellectuals and tourists have climbed this meandering path for millennia. In 2014, some 10,000 kilometers away, construction of China's fourth Antarctic research station was completed. It too was named after Mount Tai. In June, the sun is about to cast its first summer rays onto the peak of Mount Tai. Sunrise watchers have been waiting all night for this scene. Some 1,500 years ago, the great Chinese poet Du Fu described the awe he felt by saying, "All mountains become smaller in comparison." That feeling continues to be experienced by awestruck visitors to this day.